Hello, Excellence family. It's Danny Barnes, Director of Agent Relations. I'm here with Paul Sardone, attorney with Excellence Title. Hope everybody's doing great. Hope everybody had a great weekend and a nice little vacation. And Paul, how you doing?
Doing good. Getting back into it after the long weekend.
Good.
Yeah.
Great topic today. Paul's going to talk about purchasing properties that are currently leased and some things that he's running into lately when people are trying to purchase those. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, I want to talk about the leases, buying a property that's currently rented or subject to a lease, because this is an issue that in the last month we've had 2 contracts with issues because of it, due to the current moratorium on evictions that's going on. So the important thing to know as agents is in the contract, section 6 in the Florida Bar as is contract, section 6 B is where you mark off if the property is subject to a lease after closing or occupancy, whether it be seller occupancy or a tenant. So if your buyer is buying a property and intends to live in it and it's subject to a lease, you have to know that ahead of time, and you also have to analyze the lease documents. So the contract provides that within 5 days after the effective date, the seller has to provide copies of the leases and any relevant information. So it's important that during your inspection period, which typically coincides with this, your buyer has a chance to review this, because there could be a situation where the property is rented for the next 6 months, and that lease continues, whether your buyer buys it or it stays with that seller. The tenancy rights continue. The lease does not get canceled because the property is sold. So if your buyer's buying and they're doing a loan where they're buying as their primary property and they have to move in within 60 or 90 days, then that's an issue. They would have to see if maybe the lease can be terminated early, if the tenant would agree, and that all requires negotiation. The issue that we ran into is the contract was marked correctly by the listing agent that it's subject to a lease after closing. Nobody bothered to verify the actual lease documents or receive a tenant estoppel letter, which the tenant estoppel letter is signed by the tenant and the landlord and tells you, what their monthly rent is, their current status, if they're up to date on lease payments, their security deposit. So everything you want to know as a person buying a property about the tenant. Well, nobody got that until a few days before the closing, which is around the time when they contacted me, because they discovered that the lease was supposed to be up in September 1st. This person was closing late August, which they were fine with, because they figured, well, this person's leaving September 1st, and then I'm moving in. They'll leave and I'll move in. Well, it turns out once they received the tenant estoppel, the person had not been paying the rent for, I think it was over 4 months. There's an eviction filed, but because of the moratorium, they couldn't evict them. Normally that person would have stopped paying, they were going out. That person also was stating that they were not leaving. So now we're faced with a dilemma, because there wasn't the proper diligence done, due diligence done during that initial 5-day period after the lease, where they knew it was subject to the lease, but nobody got that. So it's crucial to get that information as early as possible when the property is rented. So in this case, we're kind of stuck where the buyer then didn't want to close on this property and inherit the headache of having to evict this tenant, can't move in, isn't receiving rent, would be paying a mortgage. But unfortunately, because of the timing of it, they had been provided a copy of the lease but hadn't bothered to review or follow up on it. So it became kind of a situation where the seller said, well, I'm not canceling the deal, we're going after your deposit. That's when I got the call. That's when we get involved. So that's what you want to avoid.
How much was the deposit?
I think it was 5 and 5, 10,000. There was 2 deposits at that point, and they were ready to close. I mean, plus the money that they spent on appraisal and on everything, basically, to get to that point, inspections, the whole 9 yards. So that's one situation, and another one was very similar, where this was actually a commercial property where the buyer was buying. the property, title came back and had several violations, and the seller told the buyer, well, we're gonna clear all that up once we get the tenant out. Well, so the buyer accepted that, signed the contract, continued with an addendum extending it for 30 days. Also finds out the tenant is basically a squatter at this point because they were out of lease. When they finally requested the lease documents, there was no, it had been a lease from years ago, and they had been there for over 6 months without paying. And, we're not leaving the seller had no access to the property, couldn't evict because of the moratorium. So now the buyer wanted to get out of the deal. In that case, I was able to negotiate. I usually get these calls when this is already happening on deals that I'm not involved in. What I want is, obviously for everybody to work with us, but also to contact us early in the process if you have questions on it, to avoid these situations. Because in this case, the person had to retain me. This became a litigation matter. It's an hourly thing. It cost the buyer a few $1,000s to get out of this contract that they should have been able to get out of from the beginning. The red flags were all there.
Didn't the governor extend the moratorium too?
Yeah, it just got extended. Basically, we've been in the same routine every month as goes till the midnight of the last day of the month, and then they've extended it another month. So, it's a tough situation because there are people, they don't want to evict people in the middle of a pandemic, but there are obviously a lot of people taking advantage of that.
Yeah, there are.
Word has kind of gotten around that, hey, they can't kick you out. So there's a lot of people that still don't, you can still file the eviction and it's still pending with the court, but the sheriff won't come and finalize the writ of possession during this while that moratorium is on. So some people are deterred by, well, I'm still gonna have an eviction on my record. Somebody looks me up, I go to rent somewhere else and they see that a landlord had an eviction, but some people don't care. Some people are just see, hey, I'm gonna live for free for 6 months. So that is happening a lot, especially in South Florida. I'm getting a lot of calls from angry landlords, frustrated landlords, who have to pay mortgages on the property. They're not receiving any income. So
I know we have
that's where we're at right now, but it's something to keep in mind for the agents when you're writing up these contracts.
I know we have an agent here who deals with who has some investment properties, and one of his tenants hadn't paid in like 7 months.
Yeah.
Nothing he can do.
Nothing you do. You could just file the eviction and have it waiting for when it's lifted. But it's looking like it's not going to be, lifted. I don't see it happening probably till January, February next year. So it's just part of the process. But they can get a judgment. I mean, that's a whole other topic. They will get the eviction, and they can get a monetary judgment. It's just very difficult to collect on those sometimes. Mm-hmm. But it does follow the tenant around after, and it could affect their credit. It's the only kind of remedy right now for a landlord, but that's a topic for another day.
Right. Before we wrap it up, during that, you said there's a 5-day due diligence period. Can they get out of it if they try to?
Or once they're provided, I have had a situation in the past where if the seller doesn't provide it, if the buyer requests it during those 5 days, they don't provide it. Same thing as like condo docs and things like that. Mm-hmm. If they don't give it timely, it's, the argument can be made is 5 days from the time it's received. So if you get the lease documents, a day before the closing, and you've been asking for them, in this case, they didn't ask for them. They actually did send them the lease, so they were stuck. But you do have, and it is in the contract and as is, within 5 days of the effective date, seller is supposed to provide all that. So it's their obligation. By not providing it, you can make the argument they breached on the contract. Mm-hmm. So that's something to keep in mind. I mean, if the seller is stalling on giving it, so you're a buyer's agent, you say, hey, the contract says, 6B says you have to give me this information within 5 days. Right. So definitely jump on that as soon as you get a deal signed that's subject to the occupancy. Right. And the same thing on the listing side. If you're, if you're writing up a contract and it's subject to a lease, you want to make sure that that person is going to be out, of the property, or there's something, this isn't going to become an issue for you with the buyer. And if it is, you disclose it from the beginning that there is a tenant there. Maybe that somebody decides to sell a property because there's a tenant that's not paying and doesn't tell anybody. You don't want to waste your time as an agent listing that property, getting a contract, and then getting that surprise a week into the contract and having to cancel the whole thing.
Right. Great information.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great information. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, that's it. I mean, same as always, you know where to find us, workplace or email, calling us, we're here. If anybody has questions while they're writing up contracts, I've helped out a few agents that just send it to me, take a look before they submit. That's no problem. That's something that I'm happy to do. And yeah, I mean, I appreciate all the support we're getting from the agents. It's growing more and more. Every week, more orders. So, we know you guys are doing well. The market's doing well, and we hope to do well with you.
Yeah. And you can message Paul on work chat, last name Sardon, and he'll get back with you quickly. And also, what was her name that works with you?
I have Doris, Janet.
Yeah, Doris.
Yeah. Doris.
What's the last name?
Doris Lopez and Janet Valdez.
Doris
They're on work chat too. They usually have more answers than I do.
All right. Well, hey, great information today. Thank you for everybody tuning in to Title Tuesday. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And thanks again, Paul, and hope everybody has a great rest of their week. As always,
Thanks, Danny. Have a good day.
You two, as always, together moving forward. Take care.